only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry.
During operations today, an oily mist was released into the air, and in an abundance of caution, we're asking all of our neighbors to stay indoors until further notice.
There could be a gas leak, not that it's toxic, sir.
I'm getting sick, and my girlfriend's getting sick, and I got 4 cats throwing up, and it's been smelling like this all night.
Okay, then you're having a reaction to it, but it's non-toxic.
A reaction to a non-toxic gas.
Again, sir, I'm not in the medical field.
Detected BTEX compounds, benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, xylene. We've detected cyclohexane. We've detected chlorinated compounds, dichloromethane, chloroform. We've detected these constituents in Mr. Lipsky's water.
Hey, I just had a question for you. Based on everything that you guys tested, is basically the water that I have at my well safe to use?
Tell you what, could you have my email address? Would you just please submit whatever questions you have in email?
Well, again, I mean, I was planning on hooking it up. Is there any reason I shouldn't?
I would appreciate if you would just send me your questions through email.
Through email. Okay.
We are continuing to monitor the community. Our monitoring results show no reason for concern.
I just decided on my own to call the gas company because that's just who I am and complain to them, hey, what is going on? And she says, I'm not aware of anything, but what you're smelling is just, what's happening to you is just an annoying smell. There's no harmful health effects. There's no need to worry. And I said, well, I beg to differ because here I am with my eyes are burning, they're watering. I now have a headache and I feel dizzy. And I have a sore throat. So you're telling me that there are no health effects, but here I am experiencing them.
What this means is that there's a shale gas boom underway.
The greatest technology and energy boom this country has seen in many decades. It has to do with fracking.
The key is fracking, breaking up the shale.
One of the most important actions we can take is to use our massive shale gas resources to begin shipping liquefied natural gas overseas.
We have worked out a new regime for LNG exports.
With huge demand for the fuel, a gold rush is on.
A slow-motion environmental disaster in California where a torrent of methane gas is spewing into the air. Thousands have been relocated.
More than 100,000 tons of methane leaked before it was capped.
Nearby residents say they are getting sick from the smell and the runaround from local government officials and their gas company.
What's making everybody sick? Anybody? Health person? Okay, what's making them all sick? Coincidentally, when the leak started? Please answer that. Well, that's a great answer.
Fossil fuel makes our air cleaner.
I drank fracking fluid out of a martini glass on this show to prove that it was safe.
Shale gas, fracking is a very environmentally safe process.
More fossil fuel, more clean water. Am I saying the more that we have used fossil fuel, the cleaner our water has become? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
And right in the report it states that due to their gas drilling and fracking operations, they contaminated our water. They admit it.
How many of you lost your water supply? And there are many more.
Yes.
Yeah. But we have gotten very good at taking very short showers, because if you're in the shower longer than that, you do get a dizzy, lightheaded feeling. We went from having water that didn't seem out of the norm to drawing Alka-Seltzer out of your faucet.
There has not been a documented case of substantial, or even, I would argue, insignificant contamination of fresh water as a result of hydraulic fracturing.
To start approving more of these gas gathering lines. That's what we really need.
We did a tremendous amount of work, natural gas going to China.
It's time to say thank you to American frackers.
The people who call 8 Mile home say it literally stinks to live there. And now they're claiming that stench caused by a mercaptan gas leak nearly a decade ago is causing all sorts of health problems.
People have experienced the rash, the bleeding nose, the running eyes, the coughing, and all those kinds of things throughout the community.
We have been ignored for now 8 years. We've been told that the health issue was all made up, that there were no health ramifications from this chemical, and we know that there are.
You can see the frustration and anger and really kind of hurt.
Yeah. How have you guys been handling this? This isn't safe anymore, right? We can't make good on the promise that we made that your home, where we picked to raise you, would be safe. They've taken that ability away from us as parents.
People start pollution. People can stop it.
This is the future. This is the world's fossil fuel future. At least that's what the global gas industry is banking on. The natural gas industry is rapidly engineering and building massive new infrastructure around the world. Most of the world's natural gas is found in hard-to-access places. Gas industry giants are going to great lengths to get it. These are FLNGs, floating liquefied natural gas vessels that can produce, liquefy, store, and offload natural gas while at sea. Billed as an economic way to get at hard-to-reach gas fields, this monster costs over $10 billion. FLNGs are a small part of the fossil fuel future the gas industry has planned for us. In order to meet the doubling of natural gas consumption forecast over the next 20 years, a huge expansion of land-based infrastructure will also be needed. This is Sabine Pass in Cameron Parish, Louisiana, the first natural gas export facility in the United States. Its first shipment of natural gas left in February of 2017, headed for Brazil. Sabine Pass expects to export at least 203 billion cubic feet of liquefied natural gas, or LNG, per year. 15 more gas export facilities are planned for the U.S. They'll depend on fracked gas to keep them going. It is estimated that 1 million gas and oil wells will be drilled and fracked to supply America's new LNG export industry, along with all the infrastructure to process the gas and get it to market: compressor stations, dehydration stations, storage fields, export terminals, power plants, and pipelines. All of this will be moving into America's backyards. The United States already has 2.5 million miles of energy pipeline, 1,200 compressor stations, and more than 400 natural gas storage facilities. Industrial installations that have a history of leaking, polluting, and exploding. The Aliso Canyon Natural Gas Storage Facility is located near Porter Ranch, California, near Los Angeles. Oil was struck here in the 1930s when the place was still remote hills and farmland. In the 1970s, the tapped-out oil wells were used to inject gas into vast underground reservoirs capable of holding more than 86 billion cubic feet of processed natural gas. Since then, neighborhoods have taken over farmlands, and tract houses have marched right up to the edge of the facility. Most neighbors had no idea how close they were living to one of the nation's largest gas storage fields. When the gas field sprang a massive leak in October of 2015, most of the neighbors had no idea the facility even existed. Over the following months, the reservoir spewed some 97,000 tons of methane, 7,300 tons of ethane, along with a cocktail of other toxins, into the air. It was one of the worst environmental disasters in the nation's history, and one of the least reported.
Overnight, their whole world is like, holy shit, where am I living? Holy, you know what? And then it took everyone's efforts to get anyone to pay any freaking attention. Why? Because there's a disaster that you can't see. Step outside. Ladies and gentlemen, look around at the disaster. There's nothing to see here, folks. It's like, takes on a whole new meaning because there's nothing to see here. If it was liquid, we'd all be floating away.
Here's the leaking gas well filmed with a special camera that picks up hydrocarbon emissions. Because the disaster was invisible to the naked eye, it was easy for SoCalGas, the operator of the storage facility, to deny the leak at first.
It went on like that for days. When SoCalGas didn't come out with an official announcement, they didn't call the schools till weeks later, and there was just no coordinated effort for a disaster, in my opinion, of the size. And so we stayed here. They kept saying it's safe, it's safe, it's safe. And a lot of people said, well, I called SoCalGas, and they told me everything was fine. There was just a lack of coordination. From my point of view, not a lot of honesty from the gas company, because their company line was, it's just a bad smell, it's safe. And yet, as a community, we got together and said, look, we're having all of these health problems, and they're all similar. I mean, bloody noses, headaches. This doesn't make any sense.
The gas well blowout was the kind of environmental nightmare Matt Bacuco had been warning neighbors about. Matt and Kyoko Hibino co-founded Save Porter Ranch, a grassroots neighborhood group formed to warn residents about the environmental dangers they'd accidentally moved in next to. Matt's here to start the story from the beginning. Day one of the leak.
I had a client come over in the studio. We're in here, doors, windows closed, air conditioning on, typical situation. And when we went out at 11 o'clock at night to leave, as soon as we walked out the door, it was like, holy crap. It was the strongest. I knew what the problem was right away. Then my client was like, what's that gas smell? And I'm like, uh-oh. It was my studio reputation. First I called 911 because holy crap, something's got to blow up here. This is a no-smoking neighborhood now. It was that strong. I called 911 and called the 800 cut smog, the air quality people. And fire truck came up here right away, air quality later. But a fire truck came up and said, oh yeah, there's a leak since Friday. This was Saturday night. Since yesterday, Friday, there's a leak. It's up on the hill, we know about it. Fire department said, yeah, we're getting calls all the way down to past Rinaldi, which is like 2 miles away from here. And we've gotten plenty of calls. We know it was a leak. We know it's a problem. We've been on the site, but don't worry, it's not going to blow up. You can smoke or whatever. And I say, still, you're not, why is anyone telling everybody? Well, it's not our job to make that call. The powers that be know. There's going to be no evacuation because it's not going to harm you, the gas. Yeah, they were both, air quality people and fire department were both of the mindset that it's not going to hurt anybody's health. It's no problem breathing this thick stuff. Well, so by now we're on social media and it's clear that people are getting sick already from one end to the other. I knew now 2 agencies, twice confirmed there's a leak. We know where it is. SS25. It's pretty clear that there's a leak. So I called up the gas company playing dumb. I said, I've heard there's a leak here. and 2 minutes plus of runaround, I'm saying, no, sir, it's normal maintenance we're doing.
Welcome to SoCal Gas. Calls may be monitored or recorded.
Good morning, Mr. Bakoko. You've entered the emergency line. May I have the nature of your emergency?
Yeah, what's the smell of gas going on outside our house all night long?
I'm not sure, sir. May I have your address, please? Thank you. One moment. Let me go ahead and check here. Thank you so much for waiting. Okay, yes, I do show. It looks like they were releasing gas. So they are releasing gas into the air in that area. And it looks like it's going to be happening all through up until the morning.
Releasing gas and making us sick.
No, it's natural gas is non-toxic, sir.
I'm getting sick, and my girlfriend's getting sick, and I got 4 cats throwing up, and it's been smelling like this all night.
Okay, then you're having a reaction to it, but it's non-toxic.
Oh, a reaction to a non-toxic gas.
Again, sir, I'm not in the medical field, so I can't say that.
Why are they releasing gas?
It's just something that they do periodically.
It's just released. This is like normal stuff for them?
Yes, it's normal. They do it every now and then.
There's no problems going on up there or something leaking or something?
No, sir.
You're 100% sure of this?
Yes, I am.
And you're seeing the information says that the only problem up here is not a problem. It's just they're normally releasing gas tonight.
That is correct, yes.
She went to get the memo that was sent down from the facility. So somebody on that facility actually sent a memo to the communication center saying we're doing normal maintenance. You think by Monday morning, someone at the facility would know that there's a leak? And when the fire department does, when air quality does, I think everyone at the facility knows there's a leak. So they sent down a lie.
During the first 4 weeks of the invisible disaster, while they were being told no health effects were expected, 700 residents registered leak-related complaints with state officials, most reporting health effects. While those days ticked by, residents were steeping in toxins that were causing nosebleeds, shortness of breath, migraine headaches, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, and a host of other symptoms. Pets died. Elderly people died. The long-term health effects of the toxins residents were exposed to are, in fact, unknown.
They were saying, well, methane, it's short-term effects, headaches, nosebleeds, whatever. But there's no long-term effects. And I said, excuse me. I said, and I brought them a sheet of paper from the Center for Disease Control that I looked up on the computer. And I said, well, according to this, these are all the short-term effects, but it says quite clearly right here, there have been no long-term studies on even low-level exposure to methane. I said, so where do you get your studies that say there are no long-term effects if there have been no studies?
The CEO of the company responsible for the leak says the danger has been overblown.
How far are we from the well right now?
We're probably less than a mile.
Southern California Gas Company CEO Dennis Arreola asked to do this interview as close to the leak as possible. So we're closer than the homeowners. Are you uncomfortable?
No, absolutely not. I've been out here almost every day since October 23rd. I feel totally safe.
Last week, California Congressman Brad Sherman said the gas company needs to get its priorities straight.
They may think that this natural gas is an asset. For those of us in Porter Ranch, we view it as a toxin.
Methane is not a toxin.
Nosebleeds, nausea, headaches, things that are unexplainable by doctors. I mean, it doesn't go away, though.
The odorant that people are smelling that's unfortunately causing a lot of this inconvenience is a short-term issue for people.
It took more than a month for the LA County Health Department to order SoCalGas to relocate residents. More than 550 residents called in for relocation. Finally, the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office filed a court order to force SoCalGas to relocate families more quickly.
The LA City Attorney's Office just secured a new deal with the gas company.
Invisible methane gas fumes continue to descend into Porter Ranch from the leaking oil well in the hills above. While downtown, attorneys with the city and the Southern California Gas Company hammered out a settlement which contains promises that are now a part of the court record.
So there's really something here that's going to force the gas company to do what they say they're going to do.
2 months later, almost 3,000 families had been relocated, and at least 2,600 families were waiting to get out.
As long as we were staying inside and the air purifiers were like pumping full blast and we weren't leaving, we felt better. But you can't live your life like that. I was making my family sick by keeping us there. I called them back and I said, we got to relocate. I can't do this anymore. We've got to feel better. What can you do? And they said, well, we're no longer relocating to homes, so we can relocate you to a hotel. And I said, I can't relocate to a hotel. I have a 75-pound dog. I have a 6-year-old child who, has special needs. I have 2 senior cats, and I have a husband and myself. We can't live in one hotel room. They said, well, we're doing house, we can relocate you to a house on a case-by-case basis. I said, great. They said, we'll put your name in. Never heard back. Someone said they'd get back to me in 48 hours. They didn't. So you know what I had to do? I had to march up to that Porter Ranch store and be gassed out there again. And while I was there, I felt dizzy and I felt nauseous. I had a headache, and I told them, I said, how long is this going to take? Because I don't feel well. Long story short, they approved me to go to get into a house. But that process then takes another week to get the relocation company to sort of get on board with what you're looking for and start sending you things. In the meantime, I started getting, sicker. And I had never had a true like liquid blood coming out of my nose since I was 4 years old. And I had a nosebleed one night. I was sick to my stomach that whole night. Woke up again with a nosebleed. My dog was sick all night and she threw up. I was like, you know what? I'm leaving. I don't care where we go. I will be in a hotel room. I cannot stay in this house any longer. And even my husband and my son, he's such a very intelligent 6-year-old. He said, Mom, I feel so much better. Like his eyes weren't bothering him. He was like rubbing his eyes and pulling at his eyes every day in the other house. Poor guy. He tells me, Mom, this air when I breathe it in makes my tummy hurt. And it's just like, as a mom, that's your number one job, is to protect your kids. And when that's compromised, you feel so overwhelmed and so angry with the people that are creating that problem for you. It's so unfair. I am really angry with them. Jerry Brown, where are you? Help our kids! Jerry Brown, where are you? Help our kids!
We are here today because we want LAUSD to hear our voices, that we want to be able to send our children to school where they can breathe clean air and not the hazardous chemicals that are in the air right now. We are not willing to have our kids be guinea pigs and find out later that exposed to this air that it's harmful for their health.
After we moved 30 miles away, everything just cleared up.
My school smells the gas. We are forced to be inside. I wake up with bloody noses and have terrible headaches. Now I'm told it's going to be another 90 days. It's not okay.
2 months after the leak began, area schools decided to relocate 1,100 students from 2 schools. The effort cost LAUSD an estimated $9 million. SoCalGas is the nation's largest natural gas distribution utility. Operating in 500 communities, its service area covers 20,000 square miles. With a $1 billion insurance policy, you'd think they could afford to take care of communities they'd harmed, even be proactive about it. Instead, the company consistently downplayed the seriousness of the disaster, causing help to come too little, too late. In early January 2016, Governor Jerry Brown finally declared a state of emergency in the area. Many wondered if the delay was related to the fact that Governor Brown's sister is on the board of directors of Sempra, the energy giant that owns SoCalGas. On January 9th, the region's Air Quality Management District called a community meeting to hear residents' complaints. The meeting was so packed that another meeting was scheduled, then another. 4 hearings were held in all. The local utility district called a hearing too.
We're also taking steps to mitigate the impact of the leak on the community. For example, we're implementing an extensive relocation program to provide reasonable alternative accommodations to those residents who choose to leave the immediate area. To date, we've provided temporary housing options.
Mr. Cho, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think you're telling us things that have been reported publicly so far, and you said, and this is in your testimony, that you need to be more proactive. You said that you found corrosion at this site. You said that this is indicative of production casing leaks. You said that there's corrosion or mechanical damage in 15 wells, and that over 50 wells are over 70 years old. So my question goes back to you, and I'm going to ask the CPUC next. How did this happen?
We don't know.
No one is exactly sure what rained down on the San Fernando Valley during the months the leak continued. A strange, oily mist appeared from time to time, shutting down parks and causing further health complaints. Many residents said they'd been seeing the mist for years.
Using buckets and rags, crews sprayed and scrubbed slides and playground equipment, getting rid of an oily residue that's been coating the Porter Ranch area.
The challenge is it's the same thing. The community continues to have to be the ones doing the testing and the requesting.
Porter Ranch Neighborhood Council President Paula Crasham says she asked SoCalGas to clean these parks at a meeting weeks ago.
At a neighborhood council meeting, health officials finally gave people an answer to the question, what is it that's making us sick? Mercaptan.
And so now those mercaptan odors, those sulfur odors, are responsible for the vast majority of the symptoms that we would see in this particular situation.
The amount of mercaptan in the air was so small that the mercaptan didn't show up at all, yet it was thought to be making people very sick. Some residents weren't buying it.
Why do we have all these symptoms? I'm looking at this graph earlier going, okay, if I didn't know any better, I walked off the street, I'd say, okay, yeah, it's business as usual, but for my whole life, I've never had these symptoms. All of a sudden, this thing breaks out, and all of a sudden, my wife's got rashes, my black lab dies of a flesh-eating bacteria out of nowhere. I got headaches, I'm dizzy. Come on, man. I mean, I'm not, that graph earlier, you guys are watering it down. I'm not buying that we're, because I got a super sensitive nose, I'm all of a sudden getting these symptoms. It just sounds like you guys are minimizing it and watering it down.
I haven't smelled anything, and I've been at the
Look
doctor.
right there.
I am sicker.
We don't smell anything, and we get very sick. It's the sickest I've been 2 days ago when I was in my house for a few hours. I didn't even smell anything.
Luckily, the next day, the leak was capped.
In fact, the first attempt to intercept the well was successful, that they've actually made connections and were able to stop this leak finally nearing 4 months, displacing nearly 15,000 residents, closing 2 schools, almost 2,000 kids. The most important thing is getting this community back in order, making sure that we can get community members, family members, to a sense of normalcy, to move back into their homes and restore this community.
Yet the prediction made by SoCalGas's CEO months before didn't prove true.
The odorant that people are smelling that's unfortunately causing a lot of this inconvenience is a short-term issue for people. Once we finish solving the leak and closing the well, the issues go away.
Instead, families returned home to a fresh coat of oily mist and continued health effects. The return of the oily mist caused 4 neighborhood parks to close. No one was reassured when the gas company claimed,
"It's actually many, 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 many times less harmful than touching gasoline."
SoCalGas had hoped to stop paying for relocation costs once the leak was capped. But when residents continued to show symptoms, the company was forced by court ruling to keep up reimbursements. In that first month after the leak was capped, 180 households reported symptoms. When testing found benzene and hexane in 2 homes, a larger round of testing was announced.
At the end of the day, it really boils down to FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's a lack of information, not knowing. There hasn't been long-term health studies.
Also in April, SoCalGas was in court fighting a court order to continue to pay for relocation. In a statement, the company said they looked forward to proving that the air in Porter Ranch was back to pre-leak conditions. At the time, 300 reports of families facing illness were known. The court ordered SoCalGas to keep paying relocation costs until at least June 17th. Good thing, because the county's testing found unusual levels of toxin in the dust inside homes in the leak fallout area.
We'd also expected and had hoped that the symptoms that you all have experienced here would reduce and go away, but as you know, that did not happen. And as you all are aware, a majority of the households in the Porter Ranch Community Council area had at least one family member who was continuing to experience symptoms, and those symptoms were very similar to the symptoms that were experienced in the 16 weeks while the well was leaking here. Testing and analysis of the dust revealed, as you probably have heard, metals that we view as contaminants in the homes in the Porter Ranch community. There are health levels established that are levels of concern that are designed, if you have a long-term exposure to these metals for years, they could potentially generate some health effects. The levels that we measured are far below those levels. However, there were some things about those metals that are concerning to us. First of all, there was another group of homes further away that we sampled in exactly the same way to see if metals were present there. When we compared what we found in the homes in Porter Ranch with that group of homes, we found that the metals were found more frequently and at higher values in general in the homes in Porter Ranch than in the homes that were further away.
It sounds reassuring when he says toxins are at such low levels they wouldn't cause health effects, until you remember he's blaming health effects on these toxins. Residents reported continuing symptoms when they returned home, yet they were told the cause was toxins found below levels that make people sick. SoCalGas was ordered to clean homes using strict county guidelines for toxic cleanup. Sadly, the company was not good at this either. They were ordered to stop cleaning when the county found them doing shoddy work. Contractors the company hired were not trained or equipped for the kind of cleaning needed. Neither were they supervised. The company was ordered to restart cleaning in 2,500 homes. This time, they'd be watched by the health department. When their work was checked, health inspectors found that SoCalGas's cleaning jobs fell short of county specifications in 2/3 of the cases. SoCalGas cleaned 1,700 homes, then got tired. In July, they asked the court to rescind the May 13 cleaning order because, according to SoCalGas, there was no public health threat in Porter Ranch. They denied the county could prove the toxic dust was toxic. And more than that, they said no one could prove SoCalGas was responsible for the continuing health effects. SS-25, the well that blew out, was originally installed as an oil well in 1953 and reworked as a gas injection well in 1973. When the safety valve broke, SoCalGas decided not to replace it. They decided it wasn't worth the cost to replace the valve since the facility was so far from neighborhoods and there was no regulation forcing the company to replace it. Aliso Canyon is also in the middle of a crisscross of earthquake faults. Why would you store billions of cubic feet of gas near earthquake faults? It suited the company's bottom line. James Mansdorfer, former SoCalGas engineer, told California regulators, "My belief is that there is a potential for catastrophic loss of life. And in light of SoCalGas's refusal to openly address this risk, my ethics just will not allow me to stand by without making the public aware of what could happen. Mansdorfer suggested adding subsurface safety valves to all the wells below the level of the Santa Susana Fault. The county and state have ordered SoCalGas to install those safety valves. Instead of heeding that order, SoCalGas sued the county and the state. They want a federal judge to bar state and county agencies from creating new standards and safety requirements. It's a big fight. Aliso Canyon was allowed to reopen for restricted operation. No assessment of earthquake risk was done. The cause of the blowout is still not known to the public. No safety valves have been required. A health department official says they have ongoing concerns about ongoing risks to the community. So far, 2 cases of acute myeloid leukemia, a rare benzene-connected cancer, have been diagnosed. 1 case in a child. At least 1 child was diagnosed with aplastic anemia, also linked to exposure to toxic chemicals. SoCalGas still refuses to appropriately fund a health study the region desperately needs. No wonder residents are fighting to shut it down. No wonder they're angry. No wonder they have lost faith in regulators and government officials. No wonder they won't stop pushing until Aliso Canyon is finally shuttered. Gas giant Sempra owns SoCalGas. The year of the gas leak, Sempra's CEO got a nice $3 million bonus. Sempra recently signed a contract valued at $1.4 billion to supply Mexico with gas for 15 years. Another Sempra project will run a pipeline under the Gulf of Mexico, connecting Texas to Veracruz. Projects like this are planned across the globe. Even with the gas blowout, Sempra's profits have been up year after year. Average dividends have grown almost 11% per year since 2008. With the planned expansion of their pipelines, storage and liquefaction terminals, Sempra projects a very profitable future selling fracked gas. Sempra recently bought Oncor, Texas' largest transmission and distribution electric utility, for $9.45 billion, beating out Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway. Turns out Oncor's sale price covers just Oncor's $9.25 billion debt. Now that's a big gamble. The kind of gamble being taken around the world by companies working to cement their position in the new fossil energy future. It's a race to see who can make the best deal, secure the lowest production costs, and nail down their company's corner of this huge emerging market. Sempra owned another gas company caught up in a toxic mess. Mobile Gas, an Alabama operator who was responsible for a huge toxic spill of the same odorant, mercaptan, that plagued Porter Ranch. The spill happened before Sempra bought SoCalGas, but the cover-up continued after Sempra took ownership. In 2008, what looked like an unimportant announcement appeared. The first sentence tells it all. There was a leak, but there was no cause for alarm. There is no risk. Sound familiar? Three years later, in 2011, residents of the small town of 8 Mile, Alabama, started to notice the strong and familiar odor of leaking natural gas. The stench went on for months and started causing the expected health effects: headaches, nosebleeds, dizziness, nausea. As residents began to complain, they found a wall of complacency from the gas company and local regulators. As 2012 rolled around, the smell and the complaints from the residents got so strong they could no longer be ignored.
Because the smell was getting to me, and it was making my head hurt, and I knew that it was very serious and that somebody need to do something about it. And I was telling my children, I say, to be careful, but you can't walk around with a mask. Can't walk around with your eyes covered up because you have your eyes burning, you coughing, and she throws up all the time because of this smell. My breathing is, sometimes I have to stop talking so that I can get a deep breath of air so I can continue on to talk, and it's just horrible. When you come out after the smell came, you wondering, you're looking around and you see, if you see people, they trying to get back in, and you talk to them, they wondering what it is, and we don't know what it is. Nobody didn't say anything till we found out on the news and from other people what has happened, and they hadn't did anything about it.
Did you consider moving?
If I could afford, I would, but I can't afford to move. You know, kind of like on a fixed income, and I can't afford it. So, but I do own my house, and it is paid for, but I just can't afford to move.
Mobile gas officials insisted the persistent odor permeating several square miles was not coming from their pipelines. We've sent crews out there repeatedly. Mobile Gas does not believe it's a leak, the company said through a spokesperson. It took 3 months of residents' pleading before the Alabama Department of Environmental Management, or ADEM, ran their own tests. Testing found extremely high levels of mercaptan in 8 Mile's aquifer. ADEM cited Mobile Gas for an unpermitted release of contaminants to waters of the state and ordered Mobile Gas to come up with a plan to clean up the pollution. A month later, Mobile Gas was still denying they had anything to do with the pervasive odor. Then the landlord for the property where the leak occurred threatened to go public with what they knew about the leak. Having no other choice, Mobile Gas fessed up, finally publicly admitting they had a cleanup crew haul away toxic soil from what they said was a small lightning-caused leak 4 years earlier. Supervised by Mobile Gas, the cleanup crew removed a truckload of dirt. Mobile Gas claimed they reported the leak to ADEM at the time. ADEM has no record of it. ADEM didn't find out about the spill until 2011. The spilled mercaptan was now returning through springs scattered through the neighborhoods. This was very bad news. It meant the aquifer was contaminated and was bringing the toxin back to the surface.
The tank was up on not a hill, but a high area. And so when it leaked, it went down into the groundwater. It didn't go out, it went down into the groundwater. And then it migrated in the groundwater down dip and came up in all the springs. So it had leaked a long time before it came up, because the quantity that they had spilled just kept migrating down the groundwater and up in the spring. So it continued to feed the spring. And so it kept bubbling up and it kept the odor in the community. But it's still being released into the air, and that's what's causing their health impacts.
ADEM ordered Mobile Gas to utilize the best control technology available to mitigate and abate the mercaptan stench plaguing the area. This is what they got: duct tape and PVC pipe. Needless to say, it didn't do much to fix the aquifer. As time went by, the lack of improvement showed up as more and more residents reporting health issues. When denial stopped working, Mobile Gas tried to comfort residents with the idea that there was no health risk from living near the spill.
And my health was fine. I had no problem with my health. But when I moved over here, my health started declining, you know. And my husband was already sick, and he passed in 2012. But to breathe that all the time, that didn't help his problem either. And he was an outside person, and breathing that all the time, that didn't help his health. And I knew it's not helping mine, you know.
Is there a day that goes by that this spill isn't somehow part of your life?
It's not a day that goes by that I don't wake up early in the morning and I'm coughing and gagging. Isn't that true? I'm coughing and gagging. And I'm running nose. Because my health is bad. And I need to remove. And that's just a fact. And I don't want to just sit here and die because of that stuff. I want to get out of here. And I can't sell it. I can't rent it out. I can't put that on somebody else. And besides that, I'm sure they know about now. They can't move it up in their mouth.
The Federal Environmental Protection Agency stepped in. Over 3 days, the EPA sampled 8 miles air. Results showed elevated levels of mercaptan as high as 230 parts per billion. To compare, in Porter Ranch, mercaptan levels were so low they didn't show up in testing. Yet mercaptan still produced prolific negative health effects. ADEM set up what they called odor patrols. People who drive around the neighborhood, smell the air, and report back. I arrived at Mrs. Debbie Parker's residence at 7:45 p.m. I immediately noticed the smell of mercaptan without even having to roll my windows down. I rolled my windows down and the odor was easily recognizable. I would rate the odor a 2. Not a real high-tech operation.
And ADEM is historically non-functional. ADEM for years and decades I've dealt with, and you're just wasting your time talking to their face. They just do nothing.
We're talking about 8 Mile, but the entire city of Pritchard have experienced this. It's not just 8 Mile. As the chief of police, my office probably was about 3 miles, 4 miles away from here. But on certain days you could smell it, and of course the men and women who worked for me at that particular time, they had to drive and interact in this particular area and had to deal with it as well. When the kids was getting out of school and the school buses that was operating in this particular area who actually stopped and the kids experiencing sickenings as well, those nauseous feelings. The odor was just that prevalent, just that strong across the city. I was at a meeting, I watched a woman cry her heart out. And not being able to get even the medical doctors to join in with the things that they were sharing that they had not experienced until the chemical situation took place. And many were saying, I never experienced this rash. I never experienced the nosebleed. I never experienced the running of the eyes until after this happened. And not making association with it. You know, they're not to. So it leaves them confused, left out, and feeling alone and hopeless in that same sense. Things wasn't changing. In fact, it was for a long period of time, the citizens was told that there was nothing wrong. You know, they was led to believe there was nothing wrong. But there's something seriously wrong. And it's seriously wrong for any company, I don't care what company it is, to tell you there's not a problem when there is a problem.
Mobile Gas stuck to their story that a lightning strike hit an underground pipe, causing a small leak, which was cleaned up quickly. They also hoped the public would believe that the leak had nothing to do with the odor. Doesn't sound right, because it isn't. Later documents showed that in January 2008, the company somehow lost more than 1,300 pounds of mercaptan. 900 pounds in February, 1,600 pounds in March, and 2,700 pounds were lost in April. Mobile Gas just kept filling up the tank as it emptied. That's roughly 6,500 pounds of toxic chemical. The definition of gross negligence, when you realize the company used an average of 500 gallons per year to odorize the natural gas they sold. It's likely the mercaptan storage tank was leaking for months, and Mobile Gas was just not paying attention. The amount spilled required reporting to the federal government. Failing to do so is a criminal offense, one Mobile Gas officials will likely get away with.
The biggest misconception to me is the fact that people call this an odor. This is not an odor, this is a chemical. It's a hazardous chemical that has been released in our community that is making us all very sick. I have respiratory issues. I started coughing again in January, and I still have shortness of breath, coughing. My children suffer from headaches, nausea, nosebleeds. Well, I say to the company, you know, if you feel that your remediation efforts are sufficient, and we know that they aren't, and we still smell the smell, then bring your families here, and you move your children here, and allow your children to inhale this toxic chemical.
Finally, in September of 2012, the Center for Disease Control did an informal health study. Within a 1-mile radius, 70% of residents reported headaches, 55% reported eye irritation, 65% reported a related cough, 68% experienced congestion, and 52% reported sinus infections. Other symptoms experienced widely included sore throat, difficulty breathing, worsening of asthma, dizziness, nausea, and vomiting.
That's the most scary part. If you knew what the long-term effects was, you can kind of prepare yourself for that, but the long-term effects is unknown.
You'd think residents would have been relocated. The idea was never even floated. Residents were told to keep their windows shut, stay indoors when needed, and keep their medications readily available. No relocation. No air purifiers, no tangible help. For 5 years, these residents had been asking for real help to no avail. When the Porter Ranch gas leak erupted in the fall of 2015, impacted residents started up their fight once again. They formed a group called We Matter 8 Mile and called again for help from state and federal officials.
We, the 8 Mile Community Association, has formed to take a stance against the pollution in our community that has plagued us for over 8 years. Our elderly are sick, our children are sick, and we've been told for years that mercaptan was just a nuisance and it did not have any effects on your health. Well, we have found out and we know different. And for 8 years, they have left this toxic poison in our community. Well, we've had enough. So today, We Matter Community Association stands, and we ask that all of Mobile County, all of Pritchard, 8 Mile, Whistler, and surrounding areas, stand and fight this fight with us.
We cannot measure, we cannot tell how much it has damaged us, how much it has damaged our children, how much it has damaged these schools that they're drinking the water and eating the food out of, how much it has damaged the crops that people are growing here, and then how much it has damaged us in our health and otherwise. So it's time for us to stick together. And if we can't stick together, then we cannot attain justice for our own health.
In spring of 2016, state health officials finally held a meeting in 8 Mile. The house was packed. Officials did long presentations of how hard Mobile Gas was working to clean the aquifer and how mercaptan levels were improving. Residents were not convinced.
While we appreciate the attempts to continue gathering information, I heard nobody say, what is the continual source of this? Are you saying that in 2008, if in fact that's the issue, that we had this lightning strike and we had the spill? Are you saying that there is no end to the point of when you can clean that up? And if that is the fact, because we do understand that you can't get a definitive date. The data is there. You're looking at the data right here. The health effects. This community is damaged. And I don't see how you fix it.
We ask for answers and solutions, Lord God. Lord, we've been in the valley and this storm much too long. We know, Lord, you can deliver us.
Then residents brought their complaints about Mobile gas to Mobile, Alabama.
We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do.
Luther Strange, state laws have been broken. We need help.
We also need help from everyone around the community to help us clean up and help save our community.
New Jersey Senator Cory Booker was in 8 Mile today. He was meeting with the We Matter 8 Mile Community Association about the mercaptan leak from 9 years ago and the impact it's still having on the community today.
Cory Booker came down to 8 Mile to lend his support. Alabama's senators, during the spill, failed to offer 8 Mile advice or aid. As of 2018, 8 Mile had received no real help.
How long will it take to go away? Does it just...
Oh, decades, a century, forever, a long, 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 long time.
Entire aquifers can and have been ruined by gas extraction and its related practices. Yet industry supporters spent the past 10 years making it sound like no fracking-related water pollution ever occurred.
There has never been any water ever contaminated from fracking.
Show us one single well where hydraulic fracturing has caused any problem. I've said that in testimony before Congress. No one has yet to come up with one single well where hydraulic fracturing has caused a problem.
Again, that there's no evidence of hydraulic fracturing itself actually contaminating groundwater. A regulator from Texas actually said you have a better chance of hitting the moon with a Roman candle.
There are no ill health effects of fracking. There are no water contamination effects of fracking.
It's amazing that industry officials, politicians, and their PR supporters have gotten away with this claim for so long. Valid cases of water pollution related to fracking have been known for decades. At least as early as 1984, the EPA had evidence that fracking can contaminate drinking water. Fracking gel coming out of a family's faucet in West Virginia led to the EPA looking into coalbed fracking causing water contamination. This New York Times report shows a page where industry actually admitted that it was fracking itself that polluted the family's water. So why did the 2004 EPA report find fracking poses little or no threat to underground drinking water? That part of the story starts with Dick. In 1949, Halliburton secured the first fracking patents and completed the first 2 commercial fracturing treatments. Halliburton has been a leader in fracking technology since then. Dick Cheney was CEO of Halliburton from 1995 to 2000. When Cheney left for Washington, D.C. to become vice president, Halliburton saw him off with a check for $34 million. Cheney oversaw the 2001 National Energy Report, which made new drilling technology, a reference to fracking, a primary national goal. Powerful industry pressure ensured the EPA's 2004 report on fracking and water pollution found in favor of fracking. That finding of innocence was needed so fracking could be exempted from federal oversight in the 2005 energy bill. That trick is now known as the Halliburton loophole. There was a similar fight over the EPA's 2016 report on fracking and water pollution. Industry powers wanted the report to state fracking-related water contamination is neither widespread or systemic. When victims showed up to testify at hearings,
they poisoned and contaminated the water of Dimick, Susquehanna County due to their gas drilling and fracking operation. They admitted, these are 3 documents which will be in my written statement.
industry supplied voices that made real victims sound like liars.
This technology has been applied more than 2 million times with no documented cases of groundwater contamination.
This time, cases of fracking-related water pollution were included in the EPA's final 2016 report, much to the consternation of industry officials. It's a simple game of spin and semantics. This is a look at a horizontally drilled gas well. This is the vertical portion of the gas well. This is the horizontal. What happens in the horizontal only during one stage of the extraction process is industry's definition of fracking. So if the casing fails in the vertical and pollutes drinking water, industry officials will say fracking did not pollute the water well. When a reporter asks an industry official like this one if fracking contaminates water supplies, the reporter will get a resounding no.
The concern is concerns that we're going to contaminate fresh water. We've been hydraulically fracturing wells in this country since the 1960s in a meaningful way. Over 1 million wells have been hydraulically fractured in the United States. And there has not been a documented case of substantial or even, I would argue, insignificant contamination of fresh water as a result of hydraulic fracturing. Now, what I say to people is, you know, with 1 million data points over 50 years, if it was a problem, don't you think we would have figured that out by now? It would have manifested itself somewhere, yet no one can actually find an incident where that has been the case.
Both people may be defining the word differently. Rex uses the industry's narrow definition. Journalists and reporters are more likely asking if the entire process needed to extract the gas or oil will pollute water. We do know of pollution cases where fracking, even by industry's narrow definition, did pollute groundwater.
Water is a commodity. You might not think it is when you have it and it's good, but when you lose it, it's gone.
Norma would know. Her water well exploded on New Year's Day in 2009, blowing a concrete slab that covered the well right off.
Norma Fiorentino's well blew up one night.
And it was just all torn up and flung way out in the yard.
Neighbors who heard the news started sharing stories about recent problems they were having with their own water wells. Fizzy, smelly, slippery were a few adjectives tossed around. Pennsylvania's gas regulator, the Department of Environmental Protection, or DEP, found dangerously high levels of methane and various other toxins in neighborhood water wells. As winter of 2009 rolled into spring, DEP found more natural gas wells with bad casings and excessive pressure, 8 in total, and more contamination of water wells. DEP suspected at least 10 homes had lost their water source.
When you're on Social Security, you're strapped for money. There is just not anything. I get $681 a month. I still owe a mortgage. Now my land is worthless. I couldn't sell this land if I wanted to. Like if somebody wanted to come in here and buy my land and I could get out of here, go to an old folks home or something, I couldn't even sell it. Because nobody wants a house without any water.
Early on, the DEP did isotopic testing that found the gas was thermogenic, coming from deeper underground. This linked the gas in the water wells to gas extraction activities. By November of 2009, DEP had determined that Cabot Oil and Gas, the operator of the faulty gas wells, had caused or allowed the discharge of natural gas, a polluting substance, into the groundwater of Dimick. DEP wrote a consent order and agreement, a kind of contract between Cabot and DEP, specifying water wells that had been polluted and naming Cabot's gas wells that were failing. The consent order also listed other recent violations by Cabot, including spills and failures of wastewater ponds. DEP fined Cabot $120,000 and ordered Cabot to remedy the pollution issues and provide water to impacted residents. In December of 2009, 15 families joined in a lawsuit against Cabot,
who, as a result of Cabot's negligence, they have suffered contamination of their water, loss of property value, permanent damage to their property, loss of use and enjoyment of their life, loss of the only thing that these people had for the next generation of this community.
Still, Cabot Oil and Gas seemed reluctant to do the needed work repairing the gas wells. When the March 31st deadline rolled around, little progress had been made, causing DEP to write another consent order contract in April of 2010. The new contract stated that Cabot had failed to produce integrity reports and failed to specify corrective action it had taken. Gas was continuing to bubble up in Cabot's gas wells in Dimmock and pollute groundwater. This time, the contract was signed by Cabot's CEO, Dan Dinges. The new contract added another name to the list of residents who'd lost use of their water well, Ray Kimball, a name that would haunt Cabot for many years to come. When DEP first tested Ray Kimball's water well in January of 2009, just after Norma Fiorentino's water well blew up, his methane levels were low, less than 1 milligram per liter. When DEP tested again in January of 2010, that level had risen to 23 milligrams per liter, a nearly explosive level.
At first, when we started running the water, you were getting spurts, like it would be air, and it was jumping, the pipes were banging up else on it, and the water was shooting out of the faucet. So at first I thought, all right, the well tank's bad. I figured the bladder in the well tank was bad. So I called Bill up and said, He goes, I'll be up in the morning. I mean, next morning he was here. Ran the water and he's like, ooh, this isn't good. So he went right to the basement. Started checking the tanks and everything because he put the well in here, Bill did. And then he went down there, he started looking, and he comes back up and he goes, there was absolutely nothing wrong with that tank. He goes, what the hell is going on around here? Because it had him, because he checked the bathroom and everything else and doing the same thing. He went outside, every faucet you turn on around here, okay,
sputtering.
It be jamming and everything else on it, and you hear the pipe, because I got all copper pipes in when we did this. So I put all copper in, so I mean, you could just hear that copper piping just banging away as it was. I go, well, they drilled the well across the street here. I go, there's a bunch of drilling up over here, and I go, they drill a whole crap blow down here. He goes, that ain't air, Bubba. He goes, that's gas.
Cabot was ordered to bring water to Ray as they were for the other 13 families. Some families accepted water filtration units set up in little barns on their property. While that seemed to work for some, others using the new system found they did not remove toxins.
There was gas in the water in the house. So now they had to add on to the system that we already had and put a big gas separator in it with a pump that runs 24/7, pumping the gas out in a pipe that goes out the back of the house and up above the roof. And then they had to put an air hose pump in there to pump more air into it because it wasn't taking enough out. Then it started harboring bacteria because it was such a big tank. Then they had to put an ultraviolet light on it. And then
so it was one thing after another after another.
So we used that water probably for almost a year. And it was so bad sometimes that my daughter would be in the shower in the morning and she'd have to get out of the shower and lay on the floor because the gas was making her pass out. And then my son had like sores up and down his legs from the water. You broke out in hives, right?
Many hooked up their houses to what are known as water buffaloes. Cabot removed Ray's deck to put his in. These must be heated in the cold Pennsylvania winters to keep the water from freezing, costing about $200 a month. Though Cabot kept them filled for more than a year, Ray has had to fill them himself since 2011. You can't drink that water. Bottled water must be bought. Not easy to have a swimming pool once you're bound to a water buffalo. Cabot ramped up their campaign to try and blame contamination on the victims. Cabot brought in huge drills to bore into people's land. They also hired hazmat teams to scour residents' homes for anything Cabot could blame. It was pure intimidation. Since methane was the main pollutant, obviously people don't have vats of it sitting around in the house they accidentally spill. In September of 2010, the CEO of Cabot wrote a letter to the head of the DEP, John Hanger, claiming Cabot's drilling had nothing to do with the area's water pollution. Cabot went on to explain that the Fiorentino water well never exploded, that Cabot well construction meets or exceeds the standards for casing and cementing, and that the methane in the water everyone was complaining about had always been there. We don't know if John Hanger laughed or did a facepalm, but we do know Mr. Hanger was well aware of the numerous violations issued to Cabot gas wells. He also knew testing done before the gas wells were drilled found no methane in these water wells. As time went by, DEP found the filtration systems Cabot was installing were not getting the job done. DEP began to look for a more permanent solution. In late September of 2010, John Hanger held a meeting of impacted families and area residents.
We are here today to really right a wrong. We're here to deliver permanent, safe water to at least 18 families who've had their water impacted by gas migrating from wells drilled by Cabot. The department has inspected these wells numerous times. We have observed gas bubbling, we have observed gas leaking, we have videotaped these matters. We have recorded pressures that are, by any reasonable standard, high within the wells that are consistent with the problems that have been reported here. We have done sophisticated gas testing to source the gas. And that testing completely identifies the gas as coming from the Cabot wells to several of these properties. We've had people here in Pennsylvania without safe drinking water at their homes and properties for close to 2 years. That is totally, totally unacceptable. It is reprehensible.
Then Mr. Hanger announced a new plan to run a water line from nearby Montrose to the ruined aquifer of Dimmock. It was a good permanent solution. Cabot would have none of it. Just after the meeting, Cabot posted this ad in a local newspaper, saying it does not believe it caused Dimmock's water pollution, and that it certainly has no plans to go along with DEP's idea of a water line. DEP answered Cabot's ad with a final consent order. The number of impacted families rose to 19. Gas had not stopped flowing into the aquifer, and Cabot had not taken action on the faulty wells that DEP required. DEP warned Cabot to take action or face a lawsuit. In this final contract, DEP placed a 9-mile square moratorium around Dimmock, a ban on Cabot drilling and fracking wells that remains in place today. Cabot continued their denial campaign, which sparked a backlash against the Dimmock victims by local residents who supported the shale gas boom.
Enough is enough! Enough is enough! Enough is enough!
When a documentary film featuring Dimmock's victims called Gasland became popular in 2010, local backlash exploded. Residents in support of shale fracking called Dimmock's victims liars and formed local groups to oppose the installation of the water line. On December 15th of 2010, DEP announced it had given up on the water line. Instead, Cabot agreed to pay a $4.1 million settlement. Each family received at least twice the tax value of their home. But tax value in Pennsylvania is pretty low. That put some victims in a real bind. While they could use their settlement money like a savings account to pay for filling and heating water buffaloes, or the high cost of running their filtration systems, most could never sell their homes. They were stuck in homes with expensive-to-run filtration systems or with no water source at all, homes nearly impossible to sell. One family was lucky enough to have Cabot buy their house, the Saltners. Cabot sold the property to a neighbor cheap, with an agreement no dwelling ever be built there. They then demolished the house and locked off the water well. Ray Kemble was not so lucky. One of the faulty gas wells is just 500 feet from his front door, and Cabot was not about to offer to buy him out for the full value of his home. Ray had the feeling Cabot's repair work across the street was also causing air pollution, on top of his water continually changing colors.
I spent Christmas Day looking for water, New Year's Day looking for water, this past Sunday looking for water.
The water has... Craig Saltner and other residents of Dimmock have lived with contaminated wells for more than 3 years. In fact, tests analyzed by the federal EPA found Saltner's water contains toxic levels of arsenic, barium, manganese, and glycol compounds, known to be common in drilling fluids.
If a state regulator is not dealing successfully with a pollution event, the Environmental Protection Agency has the authority to step in and take action. In early 2012, the EPA released a memo announcing new testing in Dimmock. EPA stepping into Pennsylvania's business hotly inflamed the already contentious neighborhoods of Dimmock and nearby Montrose. Pro-gas groups were working to make it hard for people in Dimmock who had no water to get it. Dimmock families were using a hydrant in Montrose to fill their community water truck and bring them clean water. The hydrant was owned by one of the victims, and they were paying full price for the water. City council meetings turned ugly as gas industry supporters moved to have local zoning rules changed so that Dimmock families could not fill up in town even if they were paying for it. Montrose was not in a drought. The city is situated around a small, picturesque lake. There's no shortage of water here. Fracking supporters just came to believe, with help from Cabot and other pro-industry propaganda, that the Dimmock victims were lying. The whole thing, in their opinion, was a shakedown of a virtuous corporation. When Ray Kemble got up one very cold morning to fill the water truck in Montrose, he was expecting trouble. He'd already been physically attacked and frequently harassed on these trips, but he wasn't ready for what happened this day.
Ray, how we doing? Ray, how we doing? All right. You guys can't fill up. Now we are now allowed to keep you from doing that. If you refuse to cooperate, we'll have you arrested today. Okay? I'll have you arrested too, Jimmy. You can have me arrested all you want. I will. Okay? I'm telling you right now, you guys cannot fill up today.
All right, fine, Jim.
You don't have stay. You do not have stay.
Get off the property, Jim. You're trespassing.
See the officer over here? She's not trespassing. That's why she's here with me. I'm borough employee. We're in the borough.
Sir,
you cannot fill up.
You can't fill this up.
You cannot.
Do you see it unhooked? Yes or no? Is it unhooked?
You're not filling.
Is it unhooked?
It's unhooked.
Goodbye, Jim.
Officer Smith, just wait. If she fills, I'll have you come back on the rest. Okay. I'll remain on the
Okay.
Police were advised to arrest Ray for filling the water truck. An officer sits in watch. When she's called about a person with trouble breathing,
South Main Street for a female patient, difficulty breathing with dispatch
The deputy decides making sure Ray didn't get the water for people who had none was more important.
Actually, I'm going to be on scene on Taylor Lane for something else. I'm going to be 10-6 out of the vehicle.
As if these families hadn't been through enough, in April of 2012, EPA returned test results that were obviously strange. After admitting just 3 months before that dangerous pollutants had been present in the area's water wells, EPA found that the water had completely fixed itself, and the water was now somehow drinkable and usable. 3 EPA officials visited each victim's home, sat at their kitchen table, and told them their water was safe to drink.
The toxicologist sat right here in this chair here. Some of the guys sat here and he wouldn't tell me what his name is or who he is. And then Rich stood over here. He sits there with a pile of papers deeper than what I have here. He goes, well, we're glad to turn around and tell you there's absolutely nothing wrong with your water and it's perfectly good to drink. So your well's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. So really? I had triple rum and coke and I slammed it on the counter. Started heading for the basement. Rich goes, whoa, 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 Ray, where are you going? I said, I'm going to go downstairs, turn that buffalo off, I'm going to turn my well on, I'm going to come up there and turn that faucet on, and get some good dimming well water up here in that faucet, and I'm pouring all 3 of you a big glass of water, and you're all going to have a drink right now. He sat there and started stuttering. I'm not drinking that water. You just turned and told me it's good for me to drink. If it's good for me to drink, it's good for you to drink first. I'm not drinking your water. You know, don't sit here and lie to me and everything else trying to tell me the water's good to drink and everything else on it. Then you turn around, you put the water in front of them. Whoa, we ain't drinking that. Oh no, you should see them. They're sweating. They're absolutely terrified. They didn't even want the glass put towards them. They're trying to run out the damn door to get away from the glass of water. But it's good for me to drink.
If Dimick's water had somehow healed itself, that would have been great. But that was not the case. Instead, these EPA officials had been told to review a limited data set and move on. It's believed that to serve President Obama's campaign for re-election in 2012, a pact had been made with the gas and oil industry. Get the EPA out of 3 fracking-related pollution cases in Dimick, Parker County, Texas, and Pavilion, Wyoming, and the gas and oil industry would offer support for the Obama re-election. EPA did curiously pull out of Texas and dropped their Pavilion, Wyoming report. Both found water contamination related to fracking. An internal EPA PowerPoint presentation was leaked to the LA Times by Rich Rupert. He's one of the EPA officials who told Dimick residents their water was safe. The leaked report warned that methane can appear at much higher concentrations after gas drilling and fracking. The LA Times leak did Dimick residents no good. EPA's slapdash declaration that their water was fine was weakening their lawsuit against Cabot. By the summer of 2012, 32 of the 36 litigants settled with Cabot. We have no idea what kind of settlements families got, because within every settlement contract was a non-disclosure agreement. It ensures victims aren't able to speak publicly about their case. These victims are forced to trade their First Amendment freedom of speech rights for clean water. Years later, victims' consternation with the EPA's shoddy test results was vindicated. The Federal Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, known as ATSDR, finally released a study that had taken, strangely, 4 years to complete. It reviewed the same data set EPA reviewed and came to entirely different conclusions. Levels in 27 private water wells were high enough to affect health. Chemicals detected above safety levels included arsenic, cadmium, copper, iron, lead, lithium, manganese, potassium, and sodium. 4-chlorophenylphenyl ether was also detected in private water wells. methane levels in 17 private water wells could be a physical hazard. ATSDR concluded that levels were high enough to make the water unsuitable for drinking. How did the EPA look at the same data set and find this drinking water safe? That's a question the EPA is unwilling to answer. Representatives from ATSDR came by Ray's to talk about his polluted water. The funny thing was, one of the officials had been at Ray's years before with EPA, telling him his water was fine.
EPA that sat here turned and told me you're EPA and sat here and turned and told me my water was safe to drink.
So the same guy that sat here one day and told you with the EPA your water was safe to drink and use
Back in 2012.
In 2012, showed up 4 years later and told you your water was contaminated.
I still can't wrap that around my head that, you know, I'm the worst one. You know, with the chemicals, I mean, they sat here and I can't even pronounce the damn thing that's that long. He missed the stuff in the water that he doesn't even know what it is. There's chemicals in the water that they don't know what it is. Wait a minute. You're CDC, ATSDR, and EPA, and you don't know what the hell it is? Houston, we have a problem.
In the late summer of 2012, Cabot got their wish. DEP agreed to allow fracking of previously drilled gas wells in Dimmick. By November, Cabot was fracking. By January, new cases of pollution were reported. This resident, who lives just a few houses down from Ray, noticed his water turn brown just after that fracking occurred.
Just came home one night and turned on the faucet and it was coming up just brown as coffee. Like that part, and that's when we called DEP. They called in the necessary people to come and test it. And then they tested it and basically they knew it was caused from the gas pressure underneath the water table forcing it up through the well.
After that second round of fracking in late 2012, Ray's water took another turn for the worse. Ray had gone 4 years without clean water to his home. Ray refused to sign the non-disclosure agreement everyone else signed. He had his lawyer write a new agreement, which he felt gave him more latitude to speak. And speak he did. Ray's not the type to sit home doing nothing if he's been screwed over. Ray hit the road, warning other communities with his first-hand story of how fracking can go wrong. Ray is also an ex-gas worker, having spent more than 3 years in the gas fields, seeing up close the kinds of pollution fracking makes possible. Dimmick isn't the only case of fracking-related water pollution in Pennsylvania. We know of more than 300 other cases. Max's case is pretty typical.
Yeah, I've lived here my whole lifetime. My father lived here his whole lifetime, and he raised a family here. We've never, ever had no problem with water. Our water's been excellent. On May the 25th, 2011, my water, I drawed a washing machine full of water. The washing machine got jet black. That's when I called Chief, I called DEP, which they came and took samples of and found it was bad. They told me not to use the water, don't drink the water. DEP told me that many, many times. Chief told me that every time they come. Sometimes they was coming twice a week for quite a while, maybe 4 or 5 months. And every time they came, they drawed out black water out of it, and they said, don't drink the water. They always took a jug of the black water back with them. Every time they come, they just told me another lie, one on top of the other, you know. And I had to go along with it. I had no choice, you know. They decided to haul me 5-gallon jugs of water, which I had to heat on the stove for bath, dishes, and being that age then, I got a bad back, a bad knee, and it put a big strain on my life. Losing your water is no fun. I wouldn't trade water for gas, no how.
If they want restitution, victims are required to sign an NDA or gag order. That's true across the nation. So there's no way to know how many cases have actually occurred. We heard Max's story because he refused to sign. Because he refused to sign, he was left to deal with his polluted water well alone. Max is still looking for water. In 2015, Ray tried suing Cabot over the repollution that happened after the 2012 fracking, and for the years of nuisance he'd endured with a leaky gas well for a neighbor. Fear of Cabot got to Ray's lawyers, and they dropped the case. Then in 2017, Cabot sued Ray and his lawyers for $5 million. Ray's rewritten gag order was not as rewritten as he had thought, or so said Cabot. During the first hearing, Cabot argued that since Ray had signed a settlement with the company in 2012, Cabot was allowed to continue to pollute Ray's property for as long as he owned it.
So these are all the business cards that you could find, that you could stir up from your stacks of government officials that have been here.
Been here, and we've gone after in DC, California.
So these are government officials you've met over the past
years.
Mm-hmm. And all these people you've told your story to.
Yep, every one of these officials. I've heard it, seen it. I've seen all the documentation, the scientific proof. But we still don't have water.
And we still don't have water.
Ray Kimball and the little town of Dimmick are now surrounded by 13 pipelines, 12 compressor stations, and more than 630 gas wells. Water pollution is just one gift the gas boom brings. Having something like this show up in your backyard is another. This is a compressor station. Or this. This is a compressed gas station. It compresses natural gas, which is then loaded into composite tanks stacked into these trailers. The gas is used as transportation fuel. The trailers themselves are said to be impermeable, but they also have vents. In a wreck, that methane can leak. Let's hope it never meets a spark. Unsuspecting Pennsylvanians drive alongside these every day. DEP has a backlog of permits to approve new fracked gas wells, more compressor stations, more water withdrawals from local streams, more of everything it takes to get that fracked gas to market. And that's a lot.
The U.S. already dominates global natural gas production. Game, set, match for now. But now there's a brand new report out today that says the U.S. is about to dominate liquid natural gas exports to other countries. The International Energy Agency predicts that in just, you ready, 5 years, the U.S. will be the biggest nat gas exporter.
The United States is currently the world's largest natural gas producer, surpassing Russia. While the gas and oil industry likes to say the goal is energy independence, in fact, the goal is exporting as much liquefied natural gas overseas as possible. Our ability to process LNG is set to grow nearly sevenfold as 5 new export terminals open. Exporting more of that LNG is a foundation of President Trump's plan to achieve energy dominance, even though exporting will likely lead to rising prices here in the U.S.
And we're doing great, by the way, on energy. We are now an exporter of energy. Can you believe that? 10 million barrels, folks. We just cracked 10 million barrels.
Natural gas averages 90% methane. Methane is one of the most potent greenhouse gases. While it dissipates more quickly than carbon, its warming potential is 84 times higher over the first 20 years, and 21 times higher than carbon over 100 years. We're talking about wrapping the planet in a new global methane industry. Doesn't sound like a great way to address greenhouse gas-driven warming. While natural gas burns cleaner than coal or oil at combustion, the process of extracting and bringing it to market leaks methane. How much methane is leaked? In the US, no one can agree. Studies have found leakage rates from 5% to 9%. The EPA and the gas industry claim rates are less than 2%. A leakage rate of 3.2% makes natural gas worse than coal for climate change. Regulations could help bring those leakage rates down, but regulation is a bad word in the Trump administration. Any hope for strict regulation of methane emissions was lost when Mr. Trump was elected. Global methane levels are rising fast. Scientists were not sure if fossil fuels were driving the spike, or if biogenic methane emissions were the culprit. A recent NASA study found it was indeed fossil fuel-related emissions that were the greater driver of growing atmospheric methane levels. As we move into this global LNG market, the U.S. will have to compete with Qatar, Malaysia, and Australia, which dominate global LNG sales, as well as Russia. Also, many nations who have shale gas resources they have not yet tapped into may start tapping. Nations like Argentina, Algeria, Brazil, Mexico, and South Africa. How well regulated will methane emissions be in those nations? No one knows. By 2040, global natural gas use will rise by 45%. That could lead to a lot of leakage. There was once a promise that fracked gas would be a bridge fuel to a renewable energy future. Instead, fracked gas has become the last great hope of the fossil fuel industry. They're planning for a long-lasting and highly profitable run. No one knows what the results will be for the planet's climate. No studies have been done looking at the impact of this new global methane industry, its leakage rates, and their impact on greenhouse gas-driven warming. The gas industry's claim of low leakage rates are taken as fact, and contracts are signed. Families living close to this new infrastructure should buckle their seatbelts. They're in for a rocky ride. Some Americans will get rich from the shale revolution. Others will be ruined by it if the industry continues to treat their victims as necessary sacrifices. It's clear this industry has lied to the public in the past. Should we expect anything different, even if the future of the human race hangs in the balance? If past is prelude, we shouldn't. Along with explosion dangers, burning fossil fuel leads to health impacts that take the lives of millions of people every year. When he was CEO of Exxon, Rex Tillerson said the world has to continue using fossil fuels whether we like it or not. Is that really the best we can do? We believe we can get to Mars, have self-driving cars and artificial intelligence. Are we too stupid to engineer the clean, green energy grid? Or does the fossil fuel industry just want us to think that we are, because the contracts are signed? The decision to remain on fossil fuels is already made. Profits are what actually govern.
The world is made for all men. Some men don't agree. Change must come before it's too late. All children must be free. Money change the world. Money rules the world. Money brings confusion. Nothing can replace the sun we have. Nothing can replace the moon we have. Nothing can replace the stars we have. Nothing can replace the nature we break. Nothing can replace the air we breathe. Nothing can replace the food we eat. Nothing can replace the water we drink. Nothing can replace the nature we break. Why they keep building weapons to destroy this world we have? There's so much to make up. Why they breaking up instead?
For a while, fracking was a big concern among environmentalists. What's happened on that front?
I think you continue to see some who oppose fracking, but it has been demonstrated repeatedly now through independent studies that have shown that fracking is and can be done safely, and that groundwater is not affected, and that's a good outcome for people to see what we've been telling them for decades.
Nothing can replace the stars we have. Nothing can replace the nature we break. Nothing can replace the air we breathe. Nothing can replace the food we eat. Nothing can replace the water we drink. Nothing can replace the nature we break. Nobody can. No president can. No doctor can.